I mean, we hear about the Ryan Terry Foundation, which is a Border Patrol agent who got shot and killed with some of those Fast and Furious guns.
Oh, yeah, the ones they were like the U.S. government was selling to them?
Yeah.
We can talk about that later. It's
Yeah.
fucking nuts.
But you don't hear anything about Rodrigo and Armenta. You don't hear anything about their daughter who lost an arm being shot by some of those guns. These are people
The
that
Mexican victims, yeah.
And there's hundreds of them.
Yeah.
There's a very weird one-sided narrative being taught and said online and in the media as far as this problem. It's like the U.S. saying there's a problem in Mexico, build a wall, and let's have all these problems stay over there.
Right.
But on the other side, you have Fast and the Furious. You have many Mexican presidents turning out to be CIA employed agents, and you have a foreign policy that U.S. has been instating in Mexico that has been horrible to the populace in Mexico.
Would you mind just explaining what you mean by the presidents literally being CIA employed?
There's been some uncovering of documents recently, the past 5-6 years. And people have realized that a lot of Mexican presidents in the 60s and the 70s turned out to be employed officials by the CIA.
Like paid assets?
Yeah, paid assets. Several presidents of Mexico have been found out to be paid assets from the CIA. We're also living through this historic moment where Mexico has deported many in the cartel individuals, including a man who supposedly was responsible for the death of a DEA agent, Kiki Camarena.
They deported that guy?
Yeah, he's deported here.
Who was that guy?
Kiki Camarena supposedly uncovered a bunch of things in Guadalajara. The name is escaping me right now. Oh God.
Most people out there are familiar, but
yeah,
it was depicted in the show Narcos Mexico in 1986, DEA agent.
A bunch of head injuries. So
no, it's all good.
The name is escaping.
Basically, we deported this potential guy, though.
But the truth is that a lot of what happened in that time in the 80s, 70s, 80s in Mexico, the Contra affair was happening.
Yes.
And the U.S. was trying to figure out how to arm these rebel groups and get into a fight in Central America. But the U.S. was just getting off Vietnam, so they didn't want to spend any money on this and support this. But the U.S. was adamant about it. So a lot of these Contra rebels that were fighting in Central America were actually being trained in Mexico by the CIA, and a lot of the ways they were arming them was through funds produced by drug sales and basically cartel movements in this area. Kiki Camarena probably uncovered some of this. Probably.
He was a really good agent.
This is beyond my time there, but from the people that I've talked to who were around for this type of thing, this is what their opinion is. And so it's the surrealness of being Mexican and also now being in the U.S. and seeing how both narratives are kind of being played out. The DEA has their man who killed Kiki Camarena, but on the Mexican side, the idea is the CIA killed Kiki Camarena. So who do you actually have?
Yeah, are you talking about Rafa Caro Quintero?
Yeah.
Okay.
Rafael Caro Quintero.
All right, because I was mixed up for a second.
Yeah.
When you said he was deported, I was thinking you were saying this was like an American citizen guy.
So
you think Rafa was paid by CIA?
They were all sent to the U.S. authorities. Right now, the U.S. is basically hanging a giant axe of tariffs over Mexico.
That's one way to put it.
The federal government in Mexico is at odds with the U.S. The federal government in Mexico is run by a lady named Claudia Sheinbaum, a part of the Morena party, which a lot of people see as the fourth transformation of Mexico. This different way of doing this anti-corruption party. But it's formed of every single member of other parties that just escaped ship and joined their party. She said that they discovered that a lot of these cartel guys were about to be released under the legal actions, which has happened in Mexico before, including Caro Quintero, who got released and just released by a judge and just disappeared into Mexico before he was subsequently arrested again. So she said that they were about to release a lot of these guys, which is completely bogus. I don't maybe one or two of them. So in an attempt to appease the U.S. and like really not have these tariffs come through, he sent members of the original members of the Zeta, Quintero, a bunch of these guys to the U.S. With realistically, this was basically an offering to Lord Trump in a lot of ways, you know. And then the tariffs actually, they said, well, you know what, no go, we're still going to do the tariffs, and now they're backing them down. So there's this weird back and push thing with the U.S. and Mexico right now. On the Trump side, these are people who are adamant about the Mexican government and the federal government's involvement in cartel activities. On the Mexican side, it's like the U.S. is also complicit in sending weaponry, having a giant consumer base, and responsibilities are being just tossed back and forth. And also corruption on the U.S. side. There has to be.
Oh, of course.
There has to be some of that. So
it's not one-sided.
So politics on both sides are both pointing fingers at each other. And in the middle are us, citizenship. On the U.S. side, a giant generation of kids being eaten up by this fentanyl epidemic that some of it does come from Mexico, some of it comes from other places. And on the Mexican side, mass graves being discovered across the country. The war is very real. People march for Palestine in the U.S. or march for the Ukrainian wars or for Ukrainians. Meanwhile, on the southern border, there are thousands of people missing. And when I say missing, I mean they're gone. Talking to somebody in Monterrey who was a part of some of these special operations working in some of these cartels, he described to me this method of body disposal. And mind you, I lived through the pozolero thing in Baja where he was using caustic soda to get rid of bodies.
Caustic soda?
Caustic soda, yeah.
How does that even work?
It's a chemical mixture. You can get it all at Home Depot, and it's basically a homemade acid that you can dissolve bodies with.
Oh my God.
This was something that he said he learned from Israeli special forces guys that went to train some of the cartels on the border, right? Again, don't quote me on that. There's a bunch of books on this. That's in his testimony. That's what he said. Then I go to Monterrey recently, and I hear this method. I'd never heard about this method, but it's an interesting one. You heat up diesel fuel in a drum. And diesel won't burn, so it just gets really hot. And you put the body in diesel fuel, and it will just cook and dissolve everything. He told me this method, and just imagining the nothing is left. Maybe some sort of dental prosthesis you might have, or some sort of I don't know, implant, but that's about it. Everything else gets gone. We are worried about conflicts that are going on overseas in the U.S., and there are mass graves being discovered all over the country that have been filled by some of these criminal organizations for decades now.
Who's in these graves, by and large?
Everything from, people that don't make it through recruitment, because some of these cartels are actually recruiting people by force. I'll give you the example of what's going on right now in Jalisco. They just found this training camp in Jalisco.
A cartel training camp.
A new generation cartel training camp. And I must mention new generation because they're a different entity, like a different type of cartel. Yeah. They've changed the game in a lot of ways. They took a page from the Zeta book. The Zetas were a bunch of ex-Mexican special forces who were sent to combat a certain cartel and ended up joining them. These are School of the Americas, Mexican, U.S. Special Forces trained individuals, high-level people. They took a lot of the guerrilla warfare manual that the U.S. implements across the globe and implemented in Mexico. So the videos that you start seeing of people getting hacked with a chainsaw or exploded in the middle of a field with dynamite and stuff like that. It started showing up from cartels. That came from U.S. propaganda training that some of these Zeta guys had, which then inspired the ISIS videos that you would see on Facebook.
Yep. I just remember those. Yeah.
I just wanted to put that out there as far as like, because the U.S. has a responsibility here. And I just want to make that really clear as far as like these entities in some way, shape, or form at a root have U.S. training or have some sort of U.S. involvement with their creation. The Zetas became what they became. A counter to that were these Mata Zeta groups, these tactical units set up in and around places like Sinaloa, where they were going after the Zetas. This is where the new generation cartel comes from. It's a highly militarized, hyper violent group of cartels. This is not the guys that have a tiger in their backyard rolling around the city with AKs in the back of a truck. There's some of that.
These are like almost uniform type motherfuckers.
They just issued this warning against some of the Michoacan family to cartels that they're going to go to war with them, and you see them. There's a video of them out there right now. The new generation cartel issues a statement of war. It says, I think.
Oh, so a statement.
So interestingly enough, they're going to war with La Familia Michoacana in Michoacan. So again, if the U.S. feels no responsibility, all of our avocados and a lot of our that's where it comes from. So if you go to Chipotle,
I don't go to Chipotle, but I eat avocados every day.
Well, that means that we are responsible for a lot of this violence down there, because a lot of these avocado orchards are paying paid protection money to the cartels, and now they're fighting it out for this.
Yeah, because isn't it like, I didn't know much about this, but I think Kat Schultz was telling me, if my memory serves me right, like avocado trees take a long time to grow. So if they're even destroyed at all, your whole business is fucked.
Yeah. So if you don't pay us extortion money, we'll burn your fucking field.
Jesus Christ.
The new generation cartel issued a threat of war against these families that control parts of Michoacan. These families these are cartel families, La Familia Michoacana.
Yeah.
They've been fighting with the federal government against the new generation cartel in drone and trench warfare in Michoacan for years now.
Trench warfare?
Trench warfare.
That's my next question was going to be, what does this warfare look like? Now you're kind of answering it.
Trenches, drones being sent over, dropping bomblets.
Oh my God.
IEDs being used to target military. There's a current petition by local authorities to a federal judge to like, hey, can you clear these mines out of the way? Because that's going on in Michoacan.
Oh my God.
I explained all this because they just found this mass grave in Jalisco, Auschwitz-like. It's being called the Mexican Auschwitz.
How big we talking?
It's a giant compound. It was utilized for training, is what they say. So people would be recruited forcefully. Like, hey, you want a security job? Yeah. Oh, come meet me here. Oh, hey, you want to work at this call center? Hey, come meet me here. And they were looking for young individuals. Basically, you get bussed over to this field somewhere, and then your instructors come out, and if you don't achieve the elements of the instruction that you're about to give, you get a shot in the head, or you get fed to the lions, is something one of the survivors said, that they had lions there, or you would get disappeared. There's shoes everywhere on this place, and clothing. And again, if people want to know how serious the Mexican federal government is about any of this, that same farm was already raided by the federal forces
before the mass grave happened.
Before they found this mass grave, they just went there, found a bunch of guns, found some dudes, arrested them, and left. And they didn't do any investigation.
No smell, no nothing.
They didn't do any investigation.
Come on.
If that's what they say. Then these groups, there's several groups across the country of madres buscadoras, basically mothers of the disappeared. There's one in Jalisco who found, like, hey, there's bodies here. There's a ton of clothes, luggage, and pictures of people in this place. We should investigate, and that's what brought the attention of the media. There's a lot of shoes there, and people's shoes don't get taken usually unless their bodies are going to be disposed of. Yeah. And they don't burn the shoes because they create a lot of smoke, and a very big black pile of smoke coming out is probably going to be something that's kind of suspicious. So there's no calculations exactly how many bodies are there, but a lot of people died in that place. There's a letter that was found there. I don't remember all of the letter, but I just remember it said something about it like, if I don't come back, I hope you remember me, and I remember that I love you. Right? This just handwritten letter by this kid. A
kid.
I mean, he was probably 19. Who under false he was just invited to this place for a job, right? There's been many of these cases across the country. Now we have the eye of the world right now because of what's going on in Mexico and the border and all this pressure, but this has been going on for years.
Yes.
It's only now that the horror of what this is has kind of like seeped into the American populace as far as what the news and people speaking about some of these things.
Not enough, though, by the way. Not enough.
Not enough. I've been called a fearmonger or that I exaggerate some of the stuff that goes on in Mexico many times. And the amount of just death alone, 90%, if not more, of the homicides in Mexico are never solved.
90% or
more. 90% or more.
Did they even try to solve them?
I was a state agent. And among many of my roles that I performed there, a lot of them I had to take custody of certain pieces of evidence or things that could be utilized for an investigation later on. And it was almost a running joke that a lot of the stuff that we secured or collected, I remember this one time we collected a lot of casings. They put them all in a bag, and the guy just laughs at it and grabs the bag casing and just throws it in this room, right, full of other casings. And you have to think about it this way. Like in one of the offices that I used to work with, the forensic service was probably 20 people. And at the height of the war in Tijuana, there was like sometimes 12 bodies coming in a night. So I get it. It is an attempt to solve a criminal aspect when it's really a war fighting, like insurgency.
Yes.
So it's just a very absurd government effort to try and solve issues in Mexico that are of a criminal base when you have a group like Zetas, who are special forces trained individuals who then showed other people how they did their thing. And now you have a country that has whole sections of it being policed by cartel forces.
Yeah.
Or has whole elements of its political class be basically paid for by some of these cartel organizations. And people might consider that exaggerated or like, hey, no, this is propaganda. There's a reason why so many political candidates got assassinated and have been assassinated in Mexico in the past few decades. It's because these cartel organizations have politicized. So if you have a political candidate, you're my rival cartel. I'll kill your political candidate. so you don't have somebody in the government.
The government's just the pawns.
There's definitely something to be said about the governments being pawns, although I think it's much larger than that now.
How so?
It's long been known that the army, the Mexican army, and big parts of the Mexican political class, from governors to mayors to like presidents, have some sort of clear, direct involvement with some of these cartel organizations.
For sure.
The Sinaloa cartel being the biggest one. There is no way that you can have a figure like El Mayo Zambada, who was mysteriously picked up in Sinaloa and flown across the border.
Oh, we gonna talk about that.
There's no way you can have a figure like that operating for almost 40 years in Mexico without being arrested, without there being some sort of agreement on both sides of the border.
Yes.
To allow somebody like this to operate. And there's just no way. And they can't tell me that it's not true because I was a cop in Mexico and I was told to not go near places or not to go patrol certain spots or to let people go.
Do you think that was pure corruption or risk mitigation?
I think that's pretty pure. I think there was some high level corruptions, and now the former guy at the top of the agency that I was with is now in federal custody in the U.S.
Oh, he is?
Yeah, Luna. Luna was the head of public safety for the Calderon administration and a few other administrations before him.
Whoa.
He was showered with praise by U.S. authorities. He was showered with recognitions by the FBI as the super cop guy.
How'd that turn out?
I mean, while he was being showered with all these recognitions and all that, we were being put through FBI background checks, polygraph examinations, toxicological exams randomly.
Like the rank and file?
Yeah. I had people showing up at wherever I was living. People have show up in my house, government guys, and like, that's a new TV. Where'd you get that? Can you see how you paid for it? Because they were trying to keep us clean.
Yes.
Meanwhile, the guy that's in charge of all this shit he was dirty as shit. So, like, I hope people can know why I'm so frustrated.
Yes.
With the amount of effort we made. And also the responsibility that the U.S. has with some of these situations going on in Mexico. The U.S. was the one that was supporting this guy during Luna during the Calderon administration.
When was that approximately?
That was the Felipe Calderon administration. That's that's 2013 era, okay. I guess. You have somebody that was supported and like fostered by the U.S. Government. And then this is around the time that Fast and the Furious happened.
Yeah, let's talk about that. For people out there who this was a little while ago now, can you just explain exactly what this was? Because every time I hear this, I'm like, I can't even believe that someone, let alone like the Attorney General of the United States, saw this on the desk and said, yeah, sounds good. I'll sign. Yeah.
And again, it's an example of I'm trying to provide you guys with a Mexican perspective of why people think that the U.S. is full of shit. Mm-hmm. Because it's something, and I get
truth to that,
and I get administration change, but we have to realize. I think it was a Project Wide Receiver. I think it was the project, the first name, and it started during the Bush administration, not the Obama administration. Mm-hmm. They were tracking straw purchases of small arms in the U.S., places like Arizona and Texas and stuff like that. Where an individual will go in there and I'll buy an AK, I'll buy a 50 cal, I'll buy something, and then they would pile these and smuggle them to Mexico. The U.S. knew exactly who was buying, where they were buying it from. Some of these vendors would like contact the ATF, like, "Hey, dude, this is getting out of hand. Like, we were selling a shit ton of guns. Do you guys want to do something?" And they're like, "Nah, fuck. We need to track them." So they decided it was a good idea to allow all these ginormous straw purchases to happen, walk them across the border, basically
deliver
them, and in some way, shape, or form, they were going to trace these where they went.
How'd that work out?
They started showing up, shooting at us with those guns, and nobody warned us about any of this. Now, this is Eric Holder was the one that signed off on a lot of this, and obviously Obama, mm-hmm. which is hilarious that you gave this guy a Peace Prize. Yeah. Like as Mexicans, like ha ha ha.
Yeah.
That's why that's a perspective that many of the citizens of Mexico have. Like, what's going on, right? But all of these weapons started showing up in weird places. The only moment that I realized what was going on was by seeing it on CNN. Federal agents, the U.S. federal agents in Mexico driving in this Suburban, they got shot up during a cartel-related incident, and it turned out that some of those guns being utilized in that incident were traced back to this operation Fast and the Furious. But meanwhile, a lot of these guns were being found in many places, including Tijuana. I found a few of them in a barrel buried in somebody's backyard, new in the box, 50 cals being found. This was around the time where armored vehicles started being utilized by cartel members because they realized it's probably a good idea to have armor. We started using armor. They started using armor. So a way they figured out how to get through armor was 50 cals. So we started seeing them, FN-57 pistols, FN-57 pistols shoot a very high velocity pistol round. These pistol rounds will go through soft body armor. And we're Mexican poor motherfuckers. We don't have plate armor like the U.S. And when we had plate armor, it's stuff we found in cartel houses and we put on ourselves. Right. So one of my friends and his wife were shot with these guns outside of their house. They murdered my friend, who was somebody I work with, his wife, and his daughter lost an arm. She survived the attack, but she's no mom and no dad. This was done with guns that were allowed to walk across that border. And again, I'm pro Second Amendment. Mm-hmm. like I get it. But something in this operation is really, really off. And it's interesting that it only like a single cartel was armed specifically. The Sinaloa cartel specifically was the one that saw the benefit of this operation. Why at least on our end.
We don't know.
It seems to have been a favorite cartel of U.S. Government for years. I mean, you hear rumors and ramblings around when 9/11 happened, and again, this is something was before my time, but you would hear stuff like this, that when 9/11 happened, the U.S. didn't call the Mexican government to secure its northern border. It called the Sinaloa cartel. Like anything Arab, you should probably not, you should probably tell us about.
We have a record of this? They called the cartel?
We don't have a record of this, but this is something that's, spoken about in Mexico in certain circles. That when 9/11 happened, like all channels were open with Mexico, including the cartel channel. Yeah. So if anything Arabic was showing up on the border wall, or if anything, any smugglers were like dealing with any sort of Arabic people, they would tell just to say something about it.
Enemy of my enemy is my friend. Kind of deal.
And there's an Egyptian national who was arrested in Baja, and some people can look this up on some sort of arms charges, international arms charges. This was around that time, like post 9/11 era, and the rumor is that the cartel guys were like, "Hey, there's an Arab guy here. Like the U.S. told us to say something about it, so there he is." So there's some sort of relationship there. There has been a relationship there for years and decades. There's no way this organization could get to the size it has. This transnational, like the Sinaloa cartel, has dwarfed every other organization out there. How
big is it?
It's not that big anymore. I mean, the government has done a lot to destroy this organization, and they've
covering up evidence.
Who knows? I mean, you have El Mayo Zambada in U.S. custody. You had Mexico send 40 top cartel heads to the U.S. as an offering, and now you have El Mayo Zambada sending threatening lawyers to the federal government in Mexico, saying that if you don't release me, this is going to destabilize regional politics in Mexico. And the same lawyers that delivered this letter to the consulate are now being found pictured with all of the top-ranking members of the federal government, including Claudia Sheinbaum, in the past 5 years. So there's a direct link. And people can call me like paranoid. Claudia Sheinbaum went on her press briefing saying, like, I've met a lot of people online. I've met a lot of people. I don't know who these people are. I didn't know that they were the lawyers of El Mayo Zambada, the biggest cartel in Mexico. But there's several pictures of her shaking hands and like being with some of these, and also some of these lawyers basically receiving recognitions for their whatever, basically.
And you believe it was very obvious to be able to find out who they were attached to?
I mean, yeah. And now it's even more obvious because they're trying to get him sent back to Mexico. And the government in Mexico is very adamant about that. They want him back.
Yeah.
I would want him back too, because I know what he, like, if what we assume he knows is true, he probably has a ledger of every single politician, government official on both sides of the border from the past 40 years.
You think he's got a dead man switch?
I would, if I was him.
All right, so let's talk about that. There's so much on the bone here, people. We're gonna come back around to things. So we got Ed here for the day. We'll get to it. So I know you're thinking about different things out there. We'll come back to some stuff. But on the El Mayo thing, when this went down, I believe it was like last July, August.
Yeah.
He essentially, you have El Chapo's sons in custody in the United States. Allegedly, there's information coming from them that's involved in El Mayo being kidnapped to be put on this plane, flown to the U.S., where he's met by fucking 15 different U.S. agencies, taken into custody. And the difference with him, the way I understood it, please correct me if I'm wrong, is that like El Chapo was kind of the flashy, I'm showing you who I am celebrity kind of guy, whereas El Mayo was the quiet, like, I don't know, grandfatherly type back in the hills. I don't want to...
he's abuelo.
Right,
yeah.
right.
So
what do you think that was there? What's the story that's... Is the story being told far more shallow than it actually is?
So like what I'm gonna state, it comes from three sources.
Okay.
I have people that work in the special operations community in Mexico.
Okay.
I have friends who work in the new intelligence service in Mexico, this new federal police intelligence service in Mexico, who used to work with me and now they're working at a high level there. And just people in Culiacan that didn't, talk about some of this shit.
Mm-hmm.
El Mayo Zambada started his career in Los Angeles. So if you want to think about the Sinaloa cartel is actually probably the Los Angeles cartel. A dude married his sister, who was a former Castro-era police officer that then disappears and then shows up in the U.S., right?
A dude married his sister who was former Castro. Okay.
Cuban...
That's loaded.
Cuban guy
who
was a former cop during the Castro days, then disappears and shows up in the U.S. Probably smells like CIA or some sort of like smells like that guy.
Where was he on November 22nd, 1963? That's what I want to know.
Who knows? Well, people can look this up, and he's a mysterious character. But this is the man that teaches El Mayo the ways of the transnational movement. El Mayo Zambada, smart individual, goes back and starts this organization. A lot of us thinking back on El Chapo Guzman from the Sean Penn nonsense that happened and all that. Don't even get started on that guy. But all that shit that happened, we were sold by the U.S. government. We were sold this. It was El Chapo Guzman and Osama fucking bin Laden were on the top of the most wanted list. You would assume that this El Chapo Guzman was this giant kingpin that was in charge of the whole of the Sinaloa cartel. When he gets arrested, nothing happens. Realistically, it's business as usual. In fact, it grows. This organization actually grows after his arrest.
The first time he was arrested.
After his last arrest and then extradition to the United States.
Okay.
Also, although he was arrested many times and escaped from prison many times.
Seen that video.
One of them was through some of the same people that made his drug tunnels on the border, went down and constructed this beautifully made tunnel. If you want to make a tunnel in a hurry underground, you have to shape it like this. This is like an arc with a point on it. Didn't
it have like a motorcycle railroad track or something?
Yeah. It had a motorcycle installed on a track. So he, as soon as he got down, he sped out of there. Again, I'm not El Chapo Guzman was a very smart man, but very smart man. But I think that his genius was in his.
There he goes.
Yeah,
right there.
Yeah, he's
just pulled it up.
Yeah,
boop. Looks down.
All of the people that are in charge of that security in this place were all fucking arrested, including the director. I think he's still in prison.
They didn't do that. I feel like we never heard from Epstein's people when that went down. I don't know if we heard from these people again, but doop, 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 gone.
Yeah.
Right through the back of the shower.
Yeah, and also the fact that he was on the ground floor of that prison is completely suspect in my mind. But like, whatever. This is the last time he escaped from prison. The first time he escaped from prison, supposedly, They put him in a laundry cart.
Yes.
And that's all bullshit. He walked out of that prison. The government
He walked
in
out.
uniform went in there, grabbed him, and walked him out of that prison. That's probably what happened.
Why do you say that's what happened?
Because the government down there at that time was extremely corrupt and their money could move mountains down there.
Yeah, but don't you think they would have at least made it look good? They say, all right, get in this laundry cart, buddy.
It was before cameras. So like they just got him out.
Cameras.
They just got him out.
Okay.
Elmaya Zambada during all this circus that's going on is quietly living in the mountains, controlling this vast empire of drug irrigation. He's an interesting character. Only appeared in a few interviews. I think his last interview was with a guy from a magazine in Mexico, Proceso. And I think I had another one that recently came out, but he was like kind of bothered by the fact that they would mention El Chapo in his interviews and stuff like that. He was like kind of shy about, or kind of like sore about the fact that Chapo was getting more coverage, I guess, in a lot of ways. Yeah. So he played it smart. He was quiet about things. Hard to pin down. Nobody knew where he was. He rolled around with like a squad of people.
What's the power sharing setup? Because like in the United States, we think about this, if we're looking on our end, we think like the 5 families and there's a boss and an underboss and whatever, but it's not like that with the cartels.
Like back when it was, again, a functioning federation, like again, the Sinaloa cartel, I think is on its way to a full extinction. It was a federation, families controlling territories, having some sort of alliance. We're not going to fuck with each other. We're going to band together and fight other people. And Elmaya Zambada seemed to have the Vito Corleone type strategy of investing in people, investing in political careers, investing in businesses on both sides of the border. So he played it cool. He played it quiet. Favors here, favors there. Elmaya Zambada was the one that actually negotiated the release of El Chapo Guzman's sons when they were abducted by the head of the New Generation Cartel, El Mencho.
When was this?
Oh, this is like a while back, probably 9 years ago, 10 years ago. They some of El Chapo Guzman's sons ventured into New Generation Cartel territory and were abducted in mass. Supposedly, Elmaya Zambada was the one that negotiated this directly with the head of the New Generation Cartel. So again, this is a very astute individual,
yes,
who has this level. And I think around that time is when you start seeing a split in these families, I guess. You have the remnants of El Chapo, his sons, now taking care of business in Culiacan.
How many sons does he have total?
I'm at the top of my head. I don't know exactly how many, but there's a few. There's a few wives, a few girlfriends. There's some twins that are living in the United States right now with Emma. So there's a lot of them.
Oh, right, the kid. Yeah.
There's a lot of them. Right now, the one on the top of the list is Archibaldo. Archibaldo is the last remaining son of El Chapo Guzman who was actually actively in control and moving things around down in Culiacan, the capital city of Sinaloa. It's their last bastion of control, basically. I don't think he's in Culiacan, probably. He's probably somewhere else, probably maybe even in another country right now hiding. I would. But he's basically at the top of the most wanted list, both by the Americans and by the Mexican government right now.
How do you call the shots in such a violent world living in another country?
Having lieutenants on the ground that you trust directly who are on the payroll.
How can you really trust them, though?
There's no really, I guess. But we just saw the mass arrest of 4 of his top lieutenants in Culiacan by Mexican Special Operations. They found a tunnel in the house that they were hiding in, by the way, bury on that led right into the sewer system. Very, very Chapo-esque. But you see these organizations and the way they operate in places like Culiacan. So, and the abduction of Elmaya Zambada is like key. So if people want to uncover this, like exactly what's going on, Elmaya Zambada is asked to participate in this political meeting. There's a guy that runs a university, and the governor of Sinaloa have a dispute, and he's asking El Mayo to kind of like, hey, can you mediate this?
Yeah.
El Mayo Zambada is compadre. It's a compadre, basically. He's the godfather of one of the sons, or like some sort of like familiar relationship there. So he says, yeah, I have to go to kind of solve this issue. So he shows up to this ranch, and it's not that, the person that he was there to help out gets shot. He says this in this letter that he writes about his abduction, and then he gets probably blindfolded and gagged and they put zip ties on him, and he gets hurried onto a plane. The guy that was shot in that meeting, Nemesio Cuen, the Sinaloa State Prosecutor's Office says that he was shot at a gas station, and they produced this video of him being shot at a gas station, which didn't happen. But they produced this video and said, oh, he was shot at this gas station. No, it's like a video of somebody getting shot at a gas station.
And they just said it was him.
Yeah.
Okay.
So basically they're lying about his murder.
Yeah.
So that means the Mexican government is trying to cover up some shit there, maybe. But not the Mexican government, the local government, the state level government. So the state level governor says that I wasn't there for that meeting. I went to the U.S. He wasn't in the U.S. He's probably somewhere in that meeting. He's a Morena party candidate, so he's part of the federal ruling party. So there's some shame there. And supposedly one of El Chapo Guzman's sons organized all this, accompanies El Mayo on a plane that flies into the U.S. And the rest is kind of history. To me, it has all the indications of a U.S. covert operation on foreign soil. But we could maybe one of El Chapo Guzman's lowest experienced sons organized all of this and pulled it off. I don't know.
Hey guys, if you haven't already subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. It's a huge, huge help. Thank you.
It could have been a mix of both. Like, he's helping with it, but they also want it. My question would be, why would the United States covert operators turn on a guy who hypothetically here they've been working with for decades, who knows where all the bodies are buried, and bring him back very publicly? This isn't like why not just kill him right there and let it die with him? Like, they brought him back, and now he's going through the whole trial thing, and he can make threats like this. Like, oh, I know where shit is. Why would they let that happen?
I don't know. I think there's something to be said about the age of some of these overt cartels coming to an end. I think there's something to be said about the age of information, and a lot of people now tuning into this as an issue and problem. Like, I used to be on the fringes of social media talking about some of this shit.
It's crazy.
Now it's front and center.
Thanks to you, though, by the way.
I've tried to figure out what the intention is as far as why now, and the only thing that comes to mind is, one, the fact that this fentanyl epidemic has reached all of us in a very direct way. Yes. Do you know anybody who has died of fentanyl?
My friend died last year.
I meet them a lot, and I will just say this one. It makes me kind of emotional because I know the guy. A friend of mine who is a beautiful, beautiful guy, beautiful man, fucking volunteers for like at-risk youth people and stuff like that. Who's this person who was a heroin addict himself in the past. His son, 14, got dosed with something at a party, and he didn't wake up.
14.
This is almost 2 years ago. His room is exactly the same way. Now that's one. 1,000. So I imagine that the U.S. is like, you know what? Whatever this is, whatever we're trying to figure out, or whatever policies, like twisted policies were around this shit, we need to maybe do something about it now. I think this is going to be the next war on terror.
Yeah.
And when I say the next war on terror, I mean, this is going to be the next big issue that's going to be in front of people. So let's figure out how to start it in a big way. There's a narrative there going on, and I don't know exactly what the narrative is. I do know that this happened before the Trump administration came into power. So people trying to pin it on Trump are kind of mistaken or a bit vague on that.
Yeah, it's too early to say stuff on that yet.
But I do think that in a lot of ways, Trump is some sort of weird catalyst for change. I'm not saying he's a positive or negative figure. I do know he's an outsider in a lot of ways. The way he's been utilizing those tariffs and the pressure behind them, and just the fact that he's adamant about the Mexican government being involved in all this, despite all the pleasantries between both governments, he's like, "But I know you guys are in on it."
Mm-hmm.
It's refreshing to hear that because it is something that is plainly true to most Mexicans. But I guess as far as a perspective shift that I'm trying to put out there for people, all of us are complicit in the U.S. as well. The policies that the U.S. has implemented abroad have greatly fostered some of the situation that is now exploding in Mexico, and a lot of these mass graves, a lot of the...
Why? Like, what do you mean by that?
The U.S.'s hunger for some of these drugs. I mean, I was in Portland. I was telling you about this Portland experience where I was seeing federally issued syringes being filled with Sinaloa Cartel heroin for
Crazy.
people. If we watch Netflix series, I mean, if you think about it, if I went to a winery that was run by Al Qaeda and then did like some product promotional for their bottles of wine, you know, and said, "Hey, buy this Al Qaeda wine that benefits this organization. They're pretty cool." I mean, I'd be supporting terrorism.
That's
and
right.
There could be some... Netflix has a bunch of series on some of these people, and a lot of life rights have been paid for. There's a lot of tequila bottles on the aisles that Americans buy. I'm not going to name the brands, but people can research it themselves, who are owned by cartel organizations. You have people, popular musicians, showing up on MTV and singing to Lady Gaga and shit like that on the VMAs, who are clearly Sinaloa Cartel funded and supported. And where's the outrage there that we saw post 9/11 when this designation came in? So there's a weird, it's a weird
double standard.
It's a weird double standard where it's like these cartel group organizations are now terrorist organizations, but somehow when they cross the border, they're all down in Mexico. Like, when's the last time you heard about a major U.S.-based figurehead being arrested related to drug distributions?
Couldn't tell you.
Isn't that a weird thing?
Yes, it's weird. We started this entire part of the conversation with you talking about the kind of the disconnect between how people in Mexico view this versus how a lot of it is like ignored or considered a problem, as you just said, down there, as they say here. And you are such a unique person to talk about this because you have skin in the game on both sides of the border. You're from there. You go there all the time. It breaks your heart to see what goes on. You've already mentioned some stories, and you have way more of people you know who've been caught in the middle of this and killed, their family maimed. You know, it's personal in every way. And yet, you know, we take it seriously here now because we have problems. But we're not looking at it through the same lens, to your point, as we do when we look at, you know, radical Islamic terrorism and shit like that.
Sharia law coming to the U.S.
Right. But there's something, and this is just a thought I've had in my head long before you were here, just because of some of the people I talk to and things I hear. But there's some sort of odd attitude that has existed until now where I think the government, the United States government, has always viewed the cartels as a net resource instead of a net threat. And here's what I mean by that, because that's a crazy statement to say, but here's how I'll back it up.
It's not that crazy.
It's not that crazy in a way, but like when you think about it, like imagine people who are supposed to be representing your government that's, you know, the modicum of the free world making decisions like this in the back office. What I mean is, when we had radical Islamic terrorism or something, they were pointing to buildings that fell down here. images that just shocked people and like, holy shit, 3,000 people died. The cartel stuff would happen down there, and the effects that would happen here would be anecdotal. Oh, Johnny died of an overdose.
Yeah. Media blackout.
That's right. So it would be, what was the old Stalin quote? It's like, one death is a tragedy, 1,000 is a statistic or something. It was almost like the opposite of that in a way, because the statistics were drug use. It wasn't people in the media didn't say cartel funded drug use. So we created this attitude that could have been pushed by people in the bureaucracy to kind of say like that's a separate problem. And the reason I'm saying this is because I've seen it up close myself as to how the government has used the cartel as a resource. I had Matthew Hedger sitting in that seat for the second time the other day. And I like Matt a lot. He was doing what his job was, but he was a knock. And he ended up infiltrating the cartels for many years, where he was a money launderer for them. And his job was for them to continue to exist so that the CIA could do what? Could use the access he would get to take care of CIA-related national security threat shit around the world. And I say that when I also know this guy, Matt, lost his brother to narcotics, and he takes it very personally.
Yeah.
And yet he had to live in that world. To go a step farther with that, there's another guy who was talking to me about coming on the podcast some months ago. We may do it at some point, who's like fucking 75 years old. He says he's not in the CIA, but he's a part of this organization with like 3-4 ex-covert guys. And, magically every time they show up in some fucking country, the government's toppled 6 months later. So do with that what you will. But he came into the CIA as a knock for 15 to 20 years in the cartels, where they literally recruited him and said, oh no, we don't want you to stop what they're doing. We want you to go be a part of it. And you see, this is something that's in the 70s.
Yeah.
So I see a pattern forever where the United States has said, they may say like, the cartels are very bad. These guys suck. We don't like it. But this bad and the access we can get is not as bad as this bad that we actually need to stop.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, again, this whole rat's nest that is being uncovered now. And, I get it. People are asking for the Kennedy files. Man, ask for the Mexico files.
Oh, yeah.
I know there's a lot of them. People are asking for disclosure on UFOs and stuff like that. And ask for disclosure on fucking wide receiver, on Eric Holder and his involvement in some of these operations, putting guns and weaponry into the hands of a very specific cartel, basically doing a destabilizing military act against Mexico.
Yeah.
You have a period of time where Mexico, in the 60s, Mexico was a hotbed for communist activity. You had a student revolt in Mexico in the 60s, in Tlatelolco, who were communist related. So they were shot and killed. There was a giant massacre there. The president that was in charge at that time turned out to be a CIA asset.
Oh, that's nice.
So there is probably some sort of call being made there to allow these soldiers to basically go live fire with some of these protesters back in the 70s. And that creates a rift. That creates generational trauma. That creates a feeling within the populace that the government is not my friend. And whoever these guys with AK-47s are in patrolling my town, who are probably more of an authority figure to me because I have the right here, they could be more of my friends. So it leads to this societal shift in Mexico where like people want to talk about where corruption comes from. It's easy. Corruption comes from the local populace saying the government is no fucking good. Let me figure out how to just pay my way through, pay other people that are not the government to pay my way through, or figure out ways around shit. Corruption is like cultural in the system. And the saying that I always go back to, Mexico has a single saying about the United States. Mexico, so far from God, but close to the United States. Yes, there is a responsibility by Mexicans and I'm like, I was born there. I realized that there is a responsibility by the Mexican government, by some of the citizenry that supports some of these organizations or that defends them, or by some of the people that listen to some of this cartel music and they want to grow up to be like that, and family dissolution. There's a shit ton of responsibility to go all around, but a big part of that responsibility lies here in the U.S. and we have to talk about that. It's pretty easy to point fingers and say, like, build a wall to keep all this unsafe things to come here. The wall is only going to inhibit the it's only going to stop the elderly and the people who are not able-bodied. Like, I just came down from the border and I saw a group of like 20 people make it across, right?
Over a walled part of the border?
Yeah. I mean,
was it a wall with an open door?
No, there's ladders. There's there's ladders. The Customs and Border Protection guys still have a manpower issue.
Yeah.
The last time they put the military on the border during the migrant caravans, I think a few of them were arrested for smuggling people up.
Oh, that's nice.
So, like, again, the whole aspect of corruption.
Yeah.
Perspective wise, the border wall is being sold as a security feature to keep drugs out of the country. That's hilarious because the border wall has been up in a lot of the places where most of the drugs go across that border. So that's pretty funny. Human smuggling and people coming across that border pay their way through to some of these criminal organizations. And some of these criminal organizations actually make more money off people than drugs. And continuously. Again, one of the mind-blowing aspects of this American experience that I was talking to you guys about, as far as like me coming up here and like traveling around and figuring things out, you hear a lot of talk about slavery here in the United States, the history of slavery here in the U.S. There is slavery going on right now.
How so?
Some people can't pay for the crossing, so they work their way.
Like indentured servitude in a way. Yeah, which is slavery.
Yeah, and sexual slavery as well. Like, I've been in some weird fucking hotel rooms in the Midwest that would fucking freak you out.
In our Midwest, that involved people that came across the border.
That involved children. Yeah,
children.
I mean, I don't know. 13-year-olds for me is a kid.
Of course, it's a kid.
Yeah,
you're talking that they were.
Yeah, during the Biden administration, many people that came across that border had a very specific little wristband on their wrist that meant that they were to be used. So a lot of unaccompanied minors made it across that border, were taken to hotels and moved around. And that's another aspect of it that doesn't really get talked about.
No.
Some people, and mind you, I'll bring this a little bit back. I worked with a few law enforcement agencies as an advisor. They sent me stuff. I give them an opinion. I've trained some of them as well.
You work with a bunch of them. Yeah.
You name them, I've worked with them.
Yeah.
But there was this whole thing about trafficking that came out. Like, this movie came out and everybody was like against trafficking and they were like fighting against all these. And the thing that made me boil in my blood with all this shit is that these guys were doing operations outside of the U.S. to mitigate trafficking. The biggest consumer of trafficking victims is the U.S. And a lot of these kids that were being put across the border, unaccompanied minors, a lot of them were being utilized and are still being utilized as ways of paying their crossing.
Are their parents aware of that? Because no.
I mean, these are kids that were just alone, unaccompanied minors coming across Mexico, being handed over by somebody that knew what they were doing. And would it make you suspicious if you saw two 20-year-old dudes showing up in a van picking up a 13-year-old kid?
Yes.
That's why they use ladies for this.
That would make me suspicious, though, too.
Two ladies, older age, working with some of these criminal organizations, putting 2 or 3 kids in the back of a car, take them to a hotel, staying in a hotel long-term, dudes coming in and out servicing. Like, that, this shit happens.
And they pay off the hotel, obviously.
This shit happens, right? And that's just one side of it. It might be minor, maybe, but it's huge in the effects to some of these kids.
No, it's what, I'm sick about it, but like it doesn't surprise me.
But the mindset is this. Again, we saw all these movies about like overseas and then other countries, sexual tourism. All that shit is true, but the main consumer is right here. And this shit happens here too. So I was like, where are all the local raids of these, hotels and places like this where some of these services are happening? Also, where are the raids on some of these, on some of these places where some of these kids are being handed over to strangers? I mean, these kids were being handed over to strangers with some paperwork, and you would see them at the airport.
Yeah, no, you're taking the words out of my mouth.
So,
Yeah.
I get the whole aspect of the U.S. being horrified by shit that's going on overseas. I'm not from here. I want to be I'm now committed to being from here because I have to fucking do my whole immigration process. But man, we talk about the horrors of the war in the Ukraine. Like, what about the horrors here? There's some shit happening here,
Yes.
like some dark, twisted shit at high levels. We went through the COVID epidemic, and you can't find toilet paper, but you can find produce, right? And I traveled around. I flew on like 2 or 3 commercial empty flights, like I did.
COVID.
Yeah, during COVID, because I had to fucking work.
Yeah.
And you know what I always encountered when I was staying in hotels? Clean rooms at hotels. And the ladies were always not speaking that clear English. So like, how can it be that we are all screaming for, the border wall, send them back, deport them, but during COVID, these were the people that were essential to work in life.
Yeah.
How can we have somebody like Governor Newsom, speak about the current policies that are, in place, while he has a winery full of people that are paying off their ability to cross that border?
Oh, so he literally has people working there who are indentured.
I don't know. Like they're everywhere, right? People who are trying to pay off their time here. I get it. I understand. There's a reason why illegal immigration is illegal.
Yep.
And it has nothing to do with the laws of this country. It has everything to do with the need and addiction that this country has to cheap, off the books labor and other things that are much, much darker.
Much darker.
Now, I'm an immigrant myself. Like, I went through it legally, and it is a shit show.
Yes.
And I get it. Like, I'm not I didn't support any of both of those. I think we could do much better than both of the candidates we had on the ballot last election cycle.
Agreed.
But I understand. I get the frustration. I get the punishment that is being issued by the voting populace. But I think we should really look at ourselves, our society, what we're doing, and what our responsibility is. I mean, I'm not talking about reparations or like none of that shit. I'm just talking about, hey, it's like realize the U.S. and Mexico are tied at the hip. Number one. It's a number one trading partner of the United States.
Yep.
If the U.S. decides to follow the advice of all the commenters online and just send drone strikes to finish off the cartels in Mexico, the only thing you're going to do is turn these cartels into insurgencies.
That's right. Thank you guys for checking out this clip. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe and hit the like button on this video. It is a huge, huge help. And if you'd like to check out this clip's full podcast episode, that link is in the description below or right here. And finally, you can follow me on Instagram and X by using the links in my description below.